It is now 10:26:11, and it is 1:19 p.m., and we're in Elliott Basement. Now I'm going to ask you some structured interview questions.
Okay.
Your first one is, what was your path to the academy?
My path to the academy is actually linked to a decision to move back to Indiana. I was working at a university down in Murfreesboro, Tennessee, Middle Tennessee State University, as an assistant professor there. And things were going okay. It's in the Nashville area, and so there's a lot of growth, and it was a little hectic. But we were actually looking at other places out of town, about buying a house. And my wife's mother passed away, who had, and after she passed, we had to decide what to do with a farm here in Indiana. And we had often talked about living on this farm, and so we decided to keep the farmhouse and property immediately surrounding the house and sell off the land. And so once that happened, I started looking for jobs in the area. Actually, I had 2 interviews in which I came up here. I interviewed for a job at Anderson University the year before I interviewed here. That happened immediately after this passing, so it's a little early. But I didn't get that job, needless to say, otherwise I'd be there. But I interviewed for the job here the following year and got the job here. So it's really a decision, it's a life choice decision to move away from suburbia and move back to this country farm and maybe slow our life down a little bit and enjoy life here.
Which aspects of your work at the academy have had the greatest meaning for you?
Well, 2 things. One of the things when I moved here, I moved kind of to tie into the last question, was leaving the university. I was leaving also an expectation to do research and to carry out scientific research, which I really love to do. That I like that more than teaching, but I like that in conjunction with teaching too. And so here, what I most like to do is work with individual students, doing individual projects and carrying out research that actually furthers my own research interests. That was something of the question, wasn't it? What was the exact question?
What does your work here have the greatest meaning for you?
Oh, so yeah, that work has the greatest meaning in teaching those. There's so many opportunities for learning so many different things, because you start studying in depth something, and there's so much stuff a capable student has to learn so many different things. To me, it's the true model of gifted, education for the learning, to me, I guess. And so we talk about this as an institution that can, where some students who have unique abilities can really excel. And this is one area I think students who have these interests and these gifts can really excel. The other thing that I've enjoyed is the opportunity in teaching general physics and chemistry. So that was the first thing that has a lot of meaning. But this also has a lot of meaning. To really think about what's important in education, especially in education, in a high school education, and even to add to that, educating some of the more advanced learners, some of the students that will excel in society and be leaders. What are the skills that I feel are important to instill in them early that they can carry with them to college and really be outstanding? Not just be part of the group, but to stand out and be outstanding. So those are the 2 biggest things that grip me here.
What do you wish you had known about the Academy before you began working here?
Well, this again ties in, but it's partly my own fault because I'm spread way too thin over way too many things and interests and responsibilities at home and things like this. But repeat the question, sorry,
Yeah,
so I
sorry,
can make sure to address it because I start answering it,
Yeah.
but so let's make sure I answer the question.
What do you wish you had known about the Academy before you came here?
Because when I interviewed, I certainly hoped to continue some sort of scientific research at a low level, no pressure. I always wanted to do research, but I never wanted to go to a big major research institution. I never chose that path, so I wanted to continue that, but it's been very difficult to continue that. The students here, being high school students and having to get a high school degree and all the requirements and all those things are good things, like the language requirements and stuff. It's very difficult to get really good solid time commitment to do meaningful research, both for the students and myself. And so I haven't produced in that way, and that's the biggest kind of disappointment, that there's so many things ideas that get started, or seeds of ideas, but just haven't been able to follow through with those to completion.
What does the social dynamic of the Academy workplace compare to that of your previous workplace?
Well, I'd say it's similar, although it's nice to interact more closely with colleagues that are, like, say, in humanities, because I have a strong interest. I mean, I look at science really as a humanities subjects, or all subjects actually ultimately linked into being human, which is humanities. And so, the interactions with colleagues reminds me of being in a college environment, because, I have my office, I go to class. It's very much like working at a college. So it's very much like working with my colleagues, except that I have a larger variety of colleagues. Now, they're not on the same expertise of interest, but actually some are, I have some pretty engaging conversations. I talk with Jeff Smith about, because he's just kind of a fountain of knowledge. He remembers a lot of things, and he knows a lot of stuff. And just, he was talking about a catalyzed reaction, the other day over lunch, and just talking with him about that. So, sometimes that level of expertise is a little lower, or it's not quite as specific or pointed towards certain things, but in some ways it's nicer because it's broader and more general. It's more accessible. It's more easily understood by me. I mean, there's colleagues in my chemistry department. I really didn't understand what they were doing. so it's nice. There's some good things about it. I like that it's more general, geared to a little lower level, but still academically challenging.
How do you think having worked at the Academy will affect your future?
Well, one thing, this is kind of being real truthful, is since I've been here, I have looked around locally, since I've limited myself to a geographic area, at possibilities of moving back into the university environment so I could engage in more research and deal with students that were chemistry majors, and they didn't have such a broad spectrum of things they had to do, and that happens in college. It's different here in this environment. I think being in a high school makes me a less favorable candidate for those jobs, so that I can't. Now I have to ask you the question again. That's being brutally honest.
No,
what
yeah.
I do. Yeah,
That's fine. How do you think having worked at the Academy will affect your future?
So that's one way it's affected my future. I think, I have actually interviewed for a couple jobs since I've been here, but wasn't considered past the phone interview. It certainly has redirected what I can do and what I can think about. I mentioned before thinking about education. I really think that I would like to pursue and bring to fruition some of these ideas I have about education that in some ways are actually, they have been espoused by others, but they haven't been broadly accepted because people are afraid to change a whole lot. And certainly education is that way. And there's so much discussion about education, especially in the STEM, the science, technology, engineering, math disciplines, and bringing it up and being in our society, there's so much talk. Thinking about teaching students well in our public school system, because I think not only at the high school, but I think at the level of what do they need starting at the elementary years, and how should we change education to do better. So when students are in high school, one, they're not so turned off by education that they're more interested in looking out the window. Now that's always going to happen, but that happens too much probably, and so our education is more pertinent and applicable to their lives. They take a little more notice. I think we tend to teach them too much. We teach too many people we try to teach too many people too many things. We need to ask, what do we really need to teach, and how do we really need to teach it? Being here has really focused my attention on those questions. Unfortunately, I haven't really brought those to fruit and to bear, but I think I have some good ideas that eventually I want to actually have produce something in black and white in print.
Yeah. What are some of the ways that you would, if you could, change the academy in policy or academics?
I mean, lots of times we probably talk about this among ourselves, among instructors, and say we do this and we do this. But when it really comes down to it, I think if you really had to do it, it's a lot easier to say things than to think really seriously what you would do. The academy is a really unique place, and as Larry Coleman, who was a friend of Tracy Renee, who was a director here, he's the one who came here and lived with the students for a while. I don't know if you're familiar with him, but one of the things he said about the academy, one of the reasons it was so unique, and so these things I don't know that I wouldn't, these are things that I probably would not change. The fact that it's a 2-year stay, there's not a long enough time to develop a big history of individual knowledge of everybody. So everyone in a way stays on an equal level. And that's a really, really important dynamic. And I picked that up from Larry speaking that, and I agree with that. The other thing that some colleagues actually that I've said think that we ought to not have, and that is maybe more focus either on the humanities or on the sciences. And of course I've already said I think everything is humanities. And I think that broad-based, that division between knowing the history and the arts and the literature and knowing the technical aspects, being able to be mathematically capable and scientific literate, those meld to make a more complete individual. Not everyone does equally well in other fields, but many, many educated, talented people can do equally well in both fields. Many scientists actually have musical talents, for example, and that's just one example. That you see that talent, that gift, that mental talent being applied across the board. So I certainly would not. I also like the spectrum. I mean, we are missing the fine arts, but there's only so much we can do. If I had to change the academy, if I could, it would take. Certainly, it would take money from the other source, from other sources. I think if certainly if we had different facilities, we could do so much more. Just creating a academic environment that was a little bit more Ivy League-like, that kind of. I was going to say high class snooty, for lack of better words right now. I know this is an interview, so that's not really what I want to say, but for lack of better words, but that kind of environment that's conducive to learning. I think we live sometimes under such Spartan conditions. We don't have that nice place to sit that's conducive to good study and stuff. I remember being at universities, at my old undergraduate university at Purdue, and there's certain places that I would walk through that were just so, this is a place of higher learning. This is a place where thinking takes place. And if we could create that physical environment here that's more conducive, so we need better facilities. Facilities that are better conducive to access to the students. Here I am, and I think, truthfully, if we were independent, if we didn't have to run through Ball State. Now that would require, our own kind of structure and stuff, and so it's practical that we're administered through Ball State. But I think if we could be an entity independent of them and operate independently of them, that would be two big changes. So facilities and independence. And of course, both of those would take a very healthy endowment to keep us going. So they might not be practical, but that's what I would change if I could.
What you mentioned before, how the academy was a unique place.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think specifically, like day to day, you would see that proves that? Or...
That's a good question. Puts you on the spot, doesn't it? But that's why it's
you
a
can
good
take
question.
your time to think.
Yeah. I think just walking through the lounges and seeing students engaged in their homework discussions and things like that. You see that at a university. I remember sometimes being at a university in the front areas of the library where you could make noise, and there'd be a group of students around the table studying together. Those kind of things are a signal that someone is engaging in the subject and really trying to learn and having these engaging discussions and topics. I think that's one good sign. It's always a nice thing for, these are high school students. It's a little different environment in college, a little different motivation going on in college. So it's not quite the same. There's a higher degree of socialization in teenage life. Not that there isn't a lot of socialization in college too, but and that's to be expected. I think that's a good thing here, because let's see, what other signs that the academy is a unique place? I mean, these are ideal situations. They aren't perfect, these descriptions I'm giving. I'd like to see them better, but they do happen. Oh, well, here's one for a high school. I don't know how often this happens. Walking by teachers' offices and seeing students in there engaged in conversations with the teachers. I've never taught at a high school, so I don't know, what to compare that with. And I'm sure there's students that have really good interactions with teachers. And of course, in a high school, usually the teacher's office is their classroom. It's different here, but in that respect. But I think that, some of the conversations I've had with students here, I think are unique here. And finally, just the level of instruction and engagement in the classrooms. One of the great things about teaching here, and I think why we as teachers sacrifice actually a little bit in the pay scale. We know we don't get paid like ordinary public school teachers. We do not have to worry about, it's not just maintaining classroom discipline and order day to day. That for a high school is probably unique. It's, you know, you probably know better than I do. But you know, that you actually go to class and it's really focused on intense learning of the subject, and it's not just kind of keeping everyone busy to maintain some semblance of order, which I'm sure sometimes, you know, from what I've heard of high schools. So as far as comparing to other high schools, that's unique. Yeah.
Do you notice any qualities of the students that you see here that you would normally see in teenagers in the general population?
I see similarities, but, well, I know this goes around with the students here. You know, there's kind of a certain attitudes towards the Burris students. And certainly just walking through the Burris crowd of students. Now, I'm not sure the crowd in the locker area that I walk through exactly what grade level those students are. But, you know, their behavior, their attitudes, you know, I mean, it's like, you know, I walk through, I don't like teenagers. They're jerks. But I don't get that from the academy students. It's not, you know, they're a little more respectful, they behave. Of course, you know, I know them more personally and you see it. And so I don't remember now the exact question, but I think that answers it.
Around the same lines, are there any, you would say, characteristics that you find in students? Like, if someone, a perspective, were to ask you what kind of student comes here, what would you say?
I think they have to have a certain independence. They have to have a certain capability, like, I can take care of myself. You know, the teacher's going to tell me this, and I've got to take responsibility. I think maybe that's one of the biggest characteristics. You know, just in my first thought, that's that characteristic. I mean, I have a daughter she's going to BSU now, but you know, I never encouraged her to think about the academy when she is in school. She struggled a little bit with classes, so she wouldn't be top notch. But mostly it's because I don't think she was mature enough to take that, I can take care of myself, I can live on my own with a new group of people and not fall apart, you know. And I think that's one of the chief things. In every question you ask me, I forget what exactly you said by the time I'm halfway through my answer.
Just the ramblings are the useful parts, anyways.
But I think that addresses that. That's I think that's probably the primary. Yeah.
And one last question that I ask everybody, because I really like it, is what is one of the most eccentric / oddball things you've ever seen at your time at the academy?
You know, you see a lot of things. I think, you know, in eccentric oddball things. It's very interesting to see students come into this. I'm going to ramble a little bit now to get to the answer of this. So I've seen oddball things, but they're what I would expect to see of teenagers. So, you know, and so you see some students come in very, very straight-laced and like real studious and everything. And by the time they leave the academy, they've kind of radicalized a little bit, you know, and they're not, they just, it's like, I can imagine they go home and their parents think, what happened to our child, you know? And that's actually kind of a neat thing, I think, the transformation I've seen with some of these students. And maybe they had it in them to begin with, I just didn't see it. But, you know, I mean, I've been to like lip sync, and that was pretty weird. But I think eccentric and oddball, I was thinking that. But I thought, you know, you see that stuff at every high school. You know, the kids act up, dress up, the boys dress like girls, and they do that, you know. And so that's why I said I didn't classify that in. So let's see, where was I going with this? The most eccentric oddball thing. It's actually this, you know, to me, this is the oddest thing I see about students. And there's a couple students that actually did this regularly, like a student Lyman Monroe. All the time he was here, almost all the time he was dressed in a suit.
Yeah.
Yeah, and once in a while you see students here.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think.
Formal Fridays.
Yeah, formal Fridays and things, and that to me is odder than actually, you know, the when they dress like when boys dress like girls, which you never catch me ever doing that, you know. But that is like, okay, I can see people doing that. I've heard that my son has actually done that at school, and he would, yeah, but but it's especially a couple of these kids that you know, dress in suits, you know, and dress up, and this was something that was actually really took me back. Yeah.
Cool. Thanks.
Okay.
This concludes our interview at 1:45 p.m.